your cables and your postings and your letters and that type of thing. You got to be able to know how all that stuff works, at least on a basic level. And you have to be able to understand, well, how do you handle sensitive or classified material? So all of that stuff, as Secretary of State, she cannot get away from and claim, well, I don't know. She can't. That's not an excuse. That's a very poor excuse, actually. It means that, you are in some deep, you've done some, you're an idiot. And you shouldn't be, you're in over your head and you shouldn't be in that particular position. And people are, well, I got some stuff here for that. On Hillary. We'll go into all of that stuff a little bit later. And we'll talk about, like I said, I'm not letting go of this Hillary stuff. This woman should not even have the opportunity to get within 1,000 miles of the Oval Office. Now, what does that mean in electoral terms? Well, it means that she shouldn't even get the Democratic nomination. It means that she should be forced to drop out of the race. Now, I know there are a lot of people that are saying that just isn't going to happen for various reasons. And, one of those reasons is because of the Clinton Foundation. They've taken a lot of money from people, from some governments and people that may have, let's just say, nefarious motivations. That the Clintons are stuck in doing what they have to continue to try to do, so that unless she gets indicted or something or gets put on trial, she's not going to be able to drop out. Now that's some of the conspiracy theories out there, and I have espoused certain things like that, saying that she owes too many people, and in order to pay them back because they've taken all this money, maybe she does have to continue to run. But it doesn't look like she's actually, in a lot of cases, it doesn't look like her heart is in it, like she's actually trying to win it. I don't know. One can never know with the Clintons. But we will get into talking about some information about Hillary and some questions that were asked of her today about the server, as well as a bunch of other stuff that's out there. Got a lot to cover today. I don't, as normal, I don't think I'm going to get to all of it. But it is, by the way, it is a hump day. Wednesday, August the 19th in the year of our Lord, 2015. And if you wish to call the show this evening and discuss anything that, we're talking about tonight, the toll-free number is 603-835-3224. Again, that's 603-835-3224. Now, what I wanted to really lead off with tonight, and I'm sorry if I got a little off track with my own personal stupid little ghost in the machine, but, I would have thought that, it would be, I'm not a conspiracy theorist believer. Trust, you know that. But I got to tell you, it was some funky you-know-what going on with my phone today, my cell phone. Now, if I had another electronic device with me, such as maybe, I don't know, my iPad, and it was going hooey, then I'd say somebody's targeting me. But I didn't have it, so I didn't, nobody else's cell phone seemed to be doing what mine was doing. Now, it could just be that my cell phone is I don't know, 2.5 years old, but that shouldn't, I've had it for 2.5 years now. Well, I guess going on close to 3 years, but it's not like I've dropped it all. It has dropped, but it's not like I beat this thing. I take good care of my electronic equipment. So it's not like this thing should be, totally obsolete because of use. Well, it shouldn't. But maybe that's the case. They have cars used to have built-in obsolescence, automobiles, and it was very difficult for people without major repairs to get a vehicle to really economically go past the 150,000 mile mark back in the 70s and early 80s. It really was built-in obsolete. I mean, your car was just, I mean, people didn't really, they didn't travel as much as they probably do today, but your car was designed basically after about 4 or 5 years to just literally fall apart, which then would facilitate the need for you to go out and buy a car as a replacement, most likely a new one. Because if you bought that car new, most likely the replacement was going to be new. And because your car was, at the end of its useful lifespan, engineered lifespan, when you went to trade it in, it was really worthless. So you were going to have to pay close to full price for the new vehicle that you were looking for. It was, if you look back on the 60s and 70s, we had some great cars and we had some great car icons and they're still with us. But I got to tell you, the U.S. automaker, they were brilliant, primo brilliant back then. It was one beautiful scam that they had going on. And I know some people are saying it was no scam, Rod. You're throwing our car makers into the mud and all that. Well, no, the truth is the truth. Back in the 60s and the 70s especially, and in the early 80s when the Japanese cars started to really come up in quality, which in the later 80s forced the American car companies to match it. Try to match the quality. They were under the assumption, look, you had car companies like General Motors. They had different nameplates for their vehicle, for all their vehicles, and a lot of times the vehicles were pretty much the same kind of vehicle, but for the different nameplates. But they basically thought and had it planned out that for every stage of your life was it for a particular nameplate. So you would, if you were General Motors, you probably entered the market buying a cheap Chevy. And then when it was time to buy a new car, you kind of upgraded and you got a better Chevy. And then you moved over to, when you got to your 30s and you started making a little bit more money, you moved over to a Buick. And you got in your late 30s and early 40s, you started making a little bit more money, you got into an Oldsmobile. And then when you got into your 50s and your kids were starting to go to school and you really made it, you went and got a Cadillac. You stayed in the GM brand. And if you wanted a sports car or something like that, or performance vehicle, then you probably went over to a Pontiac. But they thought they would get you and keep you with all these nameplates and these different brands, even though, your Chevy and your Buick and your Oldsmobile, it might be basically the same car on the same platform and the same frame. They just, changed the name, changed a little bit of the styling, and changed the, the wonderful doodads inside the car. That's it. And they thought they had you. And for a while, that system actually, for a good 30, 40, 50 years, that type of planning, corporate planning in the auto industry actually worked. And all three major auto companies in the U.S. basically had that type of planned system. They try to get you in with their entry level. They move you up to the mid, somewhere in the mid level range, whatever they had, and then they get you into the luxury level after you graduated into the luxury level and you made your, you climbed the corporate ladder and all that kind of stuff, or you saved your money, or you sent your kids off and you were, going to be empty nesters now. That's how it worked. And then the foreign car companies, especially the Japanese car companies, they came in and upset the apple cart. And for a while there, the American manufacturers resisted it. They didn't like it. They didn't like the fact that the Japanese imports were starting to up the ante as far as quality. They didn't like the fact that German imports like BMW and Mercedes were starting to infiltrate and become more and more popular. And BMW did not used to be considered to be a luxury brand. It didn't. But over the years, they built their quality, they built the system, and now it's, BMW is up there as far as a luxury brand. You can buy BMWs that cost as much as a Mercedes. So, but the American manufacturers, they didn't particularly like that at first, and they resisted that. And they even tried to get Congress, to pass legislation and tariffs and all that kind of stuff to make it more expensive or block certain things, certain kind of cars coming into the country. And that type of system is still in place today, folks. Understand that. Due to our wonderful EPA, which I got some news on the EPA too, but due to, to our wonderful EPA, there are a lot of cars that are sold and driven quite well in Europe that cannot be sold here in the United States. They're not for the North American market. And why is that? Because they do not meet the so-called safety standards or environmental emission standards. And the car manufacturers in Europe, look, this is the same thing with American car manufacturers, especially like Ford, who build cars in Europe with the Ford nameplate for the European market that you will never see here because, again, those cars that are manufactured there do not meet the requirements for being on United States roads. Now, if you were to, this is why when you buy some of these, supercars, you see supercars, super sports cars, like Lamborghini and all that kind of stuff, when they import those cars, they don't go directly from the manufacturer through the importer to a showroom or a dealer. No, they sit out there at the port. And why are they sitting at the port? Well, they have to sit there at the port until somebody can get there. Until it can pass customs. How does it pass customs? Well, in order for it to pass customs, there has to be work done on these vehicles to bring them up, especially, mostly for emission standards. They have to be brought up to U.S. emissions standards. Because most of those vehicles are not built for the American market, so they do not automatically pass the emissions stuff, which is a bunch of crap a lot of times. So there has to be more money that's put into these things, which is, again, one reason why some of these cars are so expensive is because you got to spend another 10, 15, 20 grand sometimes to get these cars up to emissions standards without really trying to affect the whole performance. Let me tell you something. If you buy a car here in the United States that has been altered for the United States market, it will be outperformed by a car that has not been modified to U.S. standards and the U.S. market. Almost every time. But that's because of, our government getting in the way. And to a certain degree, a lot of that stuff, some of that stuff from in the earlier days in the 70s and 80s was put in place simply because of the lobbying efforts of some U.S. manufacturers who didn't either have the ability at that particular time or didn't want to spend the energy and money and capital to invest into catching up to what the foreigners were doing. They really didn't. And they wanted to make things a little bit more expensive, so their cars would seem more like a bargain. So if you wanted a Mercedes, well, you're going to have to pay a little bit more because there was more tariffs and stuff to bring that car in. And then the foreign manufacturers started to get a little bit smarter. And they started building manufacturing plants in the United States. Well, that kind of upset the market as well, because now there are no tariffs, and with no tariffs, that also means that there is the Americans are being employed. They're being employed to build these things in American plants, even though it's a foreign car. I think the Honda Civic is built here. I think the one of the a couple of the Toyota cars are built here. I know BMW has a plant here. I think Hyundai has a plant. One of the Korean thing, Hyundai or something. I think they have a plant here in the United States. I think Mercedes has a plant. So they started building here in order to get past that kind. And to a certain degree, Volkswagen, for instance, the Jetta is actually, Jetta is made in Mexico now. I think the Jetta is made, the American Jetta, because in Europe it's called the Bora. But here in the United States, the Jetta is made in Mexico. And it's made for the North American market, meaning it's made for the U.S. and Canada. But that's why oftentimes you'll go overseas, especially in Europe, and you'll see all these wonderful cars by these European manufacturers with these car name plates that do not appear in the U.S. And now you know why. We'll be back.